On the fear of God, St. John in one of his letters states, "Perfect love casts our fear." What does this saint mean when he says this? What type of love and what type of fear is he referring to? The psalmist tells us, "Fear the Lord, all those who love him." We also find thousands of similar sayings in sacred scripture. If then the saints who so loved him were afraid of him, how can he say, "Love casts out fear"? St. John wants to demonstrate to us that there are two types of fear, one preliminary and the other perfect. The one is found with novices, or, as some call them, the devout. The other occurs in those who are mature in holiness and have achieved true love. One forms a desire for God by fear of judgment. This is, as we have related, the preliminary. His beginning is not concerned with what is good, but with the fear of torments. Another forms a desire for God because he loves God and knows what is desirable to God. Such a one is virtue itself. Understand what it is to be present with God. Behold, this is the man who has genuine love, which St. John calls perfect love, and this love guides one on to perfect fear. Such a one fears and keeps God's will, not out of fear of punishment, not to avoid judgment, but rather, as we have said, since he has savoured the sweetness of abiding with God. He is afraid he might fall away from it. He is afraid of being turned away. This is the perfect fear which is created from perfect love and casts out that first fear. This is why he asserts that perfect love casts out fear. But it is impossible to arrive at perfect fear, except by that first fear. On the fear of God, there are, as St. Basil states, 3 stages by which we can be pleasing to God. The first is that of fearing punishment. This makes us worthy, and we are in the place of slaves. The second, the state of slaves working for money, fulfilling orders for our gain, and by so doing earning our hire. The third is the state of sons, where we struggle for the highest good. Because a son, when he becomes mature, does his father's will not on account of fear of being beaten, nor to obtain a reward from him, but rather because he knows that he is loved. He loves and honours his father, and he is sure that all his father's goods are his own. Such a one is worthy to hear, "You are no longer a slave, but a son, and heir of God through Christ." As we have said before, he ceases to fear God with that initial fear, but truly loves him. And so St. Anthony declares, "I no longer fear God." And the Lord said to Abraham after the offering of his son, "Now I know that you fear God." This is a sign that perfect fear is produced from love. What does he refer to in saying, "Now I know"? Abraham was generous. He did many things at the command of God. He obeyed God and did not spare his only son. He drifted from place to place in a strange land among a people that were idolatrous, where there was no fear of God. And above all this he endured the fearful test of offering up his only son. After these things, God said to him, "Now I know that you fear God." Plainly he meant that perfect fear, which is a property of the saints. So no longer by fear of punishment, nor to obtain a reward, do they do the will of God, but with love they are afraid to do anything separate from the will of the beloved, and thus he states, "Love casts out fear." No more do they act from fear, but they fear instead out of love. This, then, is perfect fear, but perfect fear cannot come about if a man does not have that initial fear, because Scripture states, "The beginning of wisdom is the fear of the Lord," and again, "The beginning and the end is the fear of God." He calls the beginning that initial fear, which is the final perfect fear, which belongs to the saints. The initial fear is of our own state. This preserves the soul, like enamel. As it is written, By the fear of the Lord every man turns away from evil. If all men turn from evil on account of fear of punishment, as a slave who is afraid of his Lord, he does some good, and starts to hope for a recompense for his good deeds, just as a hired servant. When then he continues in fleeing from evil, as we say, on account of fear as a slave, and doing good from hope like a hired slave, spending time with God, and also being joined to God, he finally tastes and comes to a certain experience of goodness, and no longer desires to be apart from it. Because who, says the Apostle, is able to divide himself from the love of Christ? Then he achieves the state of a son, and loves goodness for its own sake, and fears since he loves. And this is the great and mature fear. For this cause the prophet instructs us about the difference in this fear, and says, "Come, my children, hearken to me, and I will teach you the fear of the Lord." Fix your minds on this saying of the prophet. See how every word has its force. First he says, "Come to me, call on us to come to virtue." And he adds, "children." The saints call children those who are converted by their words from evil ways to virtue. As the Apostle states, "Children of whom I am in labor again, until Christ is formed in you." Then, after calling us to him, and pushing us on to this conversion, he states, "I will give instruction about the fear of the Lord. Consider well the saints' boldness." When we desire to say something about the spiritual life, we always declare, "Do you wish to discuss and reveal something concerning the fear of God or some other virtue?" But he acts differently and boldly says, "Come, children, hearken to me, and I will teach you the fear of the Lord." Who is the man who desires life and loves to see good days? Then, as though someone answered, "I do. Teach me how to live and to see good days." He sets out to teach him, saying, "Refrain your tongue from evil, and your lips from speaking guile." See, then he cuts off the source of evil by the fear of God. To keep your tongue from evil, that is, do not offend the conscience of your neighbor with anything, and do not speak evil or be irritable. And your lips that they speak no trickery. That is, do not speak in order to trick your neighbor. Then he enjoins, "Turn away from evil." Initially he speaks of certain sins, backbiting and trickery. Then he goes on to speak universally of all sins. Turn from evil. That is to say, flee from all evil, and turn from all things that lead to vice. Nor again does he just say that, and then keep quiet, but he enjoins, and do good. Because it can happen that although a man does no wrong, he nevertheless does no good. When a man does not hurt anyone, he does not, however, show mercy when he does not hate, for he does not love. Then, quite well, the prophet says, "Turn from evil and do good." See how he reveals the consequence of the three states of which we spoke of earlier. How by the fear of God we are led by the hand to reject evil, and so we come to be joined with goodness. Because if a man is worthy to reject evil and to flee from it naturally, he can work good things, being led on the way by the example of the saints. Having said this, he leads on to its consequences, saying also, "Seek peace and pursue it." Not satisfied with only saying, "Seek it," he adds, "Run after it quickly, so that you might grab hold of it." Focus your mind steadfastly on this saying, and ponder the zeal of the saint. When a man is deemed worthy of forsaking evil, and is eager to repose with God, and to do good, battles with the enemy come rapidly against him. So he has to struggle, to labor, to be crushed. Not only does he fear to go back to evil, as we said about the slave, but he hopes, as we stated before, for the good reward of a hired laborer. Since he is being assaulted, he fights with weapons and with his fists. He does good things, but with much turmoil and weariness. But when help from God works in him, and he starts to be more stable in his pursuit of good things, then he has rest in his sight. Then he steps ahead toward peace. Then he knows from experience the battle and the joy and happiness of peace. Then for the rest he earnestly desires it, and is eager to run after it. And at the end he achieves it, so that he obtains it, and builds it into himself. And what is better than the soul of one who is deemed worthy to achieve this measure? Such a one, as we have said, achieves the state of sonship. Because so blessed are the peacemakers that they are known as the sons of God. What, more than all else, makes a soul do good things if not the delight that goodness bears it? Who knows that joy save the one who has experienced it? Such a one finds what that perfect fear is, as we said many times. Now we have heard what the perfect fear of the saints is, and what is the initial fear that belongs to our humble state, how we can get away from it, and where we come to by the fear of God. At last, we yearn to understand how the fear of God occurs, and to do this we must say what it is that pushes us away from the fear of God. The Fathers tell us that one achieves the fear of God by retaining the thought of death in one's mind, by recalling the everlasting punishment, by studying his actions that day every evening, and every morning studying his behavior at night, never allowing his tongue to have free rein, and keeping nearby someone who has the fear of God as his spiritual father. One time a brother said to one of the elders, "What will I do, O Father, that I should learn to fear the Lord?" And he said, "Go and become a disciple of the man who has the fear of the Lord, and from his fear of the Lord you will learn to fear the Lord." We drive away the fear of the Lord when we do the opposite. That is when we do not recall our death or tortures, and we do not give heed to our state, or study how we spend our time, but we abide apathetically being occupied with various things, gratifying our freedom, and being self-indulgent, which is the worst of all of them, for this is perfect ruin. What drives away the fear of the Lord so well? As satisfying our desires. So when Abba Agathon was asked about self-indulgence, he said that it is like a great fire, which when it burns up, men flee, and the fruits of the trees around it are completely destroyed. O good Lord, you know the strength of this passion, and its ruination. And when he was again asked, "Is it really so dangerous?" he said, "Yes, there is nothing which is more hazardous than self-indulgence. It readies the soil for all the vices, for it drives out from the soul the fear of God. Because if each man turns from evil by the fear of the Lord, there is a good reason why. Where there is no fear of the Lord, all vices are discovered. Let God save us from the fatal illness of self-indulgence. Intemperance has many different forms. One may be intemperate in speech, touch, and sight. From intemperance one begins to use idle and worldly talk, indecent joking, and buffoonery. There is an intemperance with regard to touching when it is done, unnecessarily, using mocking signs with hands, when there is pushing for a spot, or grabbing something for oneself or drawing, near to someone without shame. All these forms are the result of not having the fear of God in the soul, and from these one starts bit by bit to be in contempt. On account of this, when God gave the commandments of the law, he said, "Regard with respect the sons of Israel." Because lacking mutual respect, God is not honored, nor is it possible to observe any commandment. So there is nothing worse than this misuse of liberty, and it is the flower bed of all the vices, for it removes the respect due to others, and pushes away the fear of God, producing disdain. Using this hazardous freedom toward each other leads one to insolence, speaking poorly of each other, and fighting. If one of you sees something which is unprofitable, and goes so far as to put it into the heart of a brother, in doing this you not only hurt yourself, but your brother, by placing one more bit of deception. into his heart. Even if that brother had his mind set on prayer or another worthy activity, and you first come and give him something to chatter about, this not only hinders what he should be doing, but provides a temptation for him. There is nothing worse or more grievous than this harm, not just to himself, but also to his neighbour. So, it is a wonderful thing to nurture this respect for our brothers, so that we fear doing harm to ourselves and to one another, so that we honour each other, and that we keep a careful check on our gestures and on our appearance towards each other. As for these last ones, as one of the elders tells us, they are in the category of taking liberties. Should you see a brother doing ill, do not hate him, and wipe your hands of him, and be quiet, and let him come to ruin, nor curse him, nor speak harmfully of him. But with care and the fear of God talk to somebody who is able to correct him, or if you can, speak to him with love and a humble nature, saying, "Excuse me, brother, but I think, although a careless person myself, we probably should not do such and such." If he does not heed you, speak to another with whom you see he has confidence, or to his director or abbot, based on the serious of the fault. But above all, as we have related, speak with a view to correcting him, not for gossip, or to vilify or scorn him. Do not speak to show him as an evil example, nor to judge him, nor to pretend to be righteous by doing this. If someone has any of the inclinations I speak about above, and he speaks to the abbot himself, he is not speaking for the correction of his brother, nor is he. If he speaks only for the injury done to himself, but it is a transgression, he is speaking poorly of his brother. But let him look into his own heart, and if he sees there a movement of anger or bitterness, may he not speak. Should he see accurately that he wants to speak from care and concern for this brother, and the desire to help to him, and if these thoughts bear a certain emotion which disturbs him, let him meekly make the truth known to his abbot, both his own doings and his brother's saying, "My conscience bears witness that I desire to speak for the edification of my brother, but I see that some of my own thoughts are polluting it. Perhaps I was at some point harboring something against him. I don't know. Or maybe defamation is pushing me to say something and bring about a correction. I don't know. The abbot will inform him if he should speak or not. There is a moment when a man speaks not from a desire to help his brother, not on account of his own emotions, but because he holds ill feelings and he is guided by ill will. And why is idle talk necessary? Often a brother learns that he is being talked about and is troubled about it. Turmoil comes about from this, and further injury is done. But when someone speaks solely from a desire to aid his brother, and that alone, God does not allow any trouble to happen, and he does not permit any trouble or injury to follow it. Take heed, as we have stated, to guard your tongue, so that no one speaks poorly of his neighbour or bothers anyone with a word or deed or gesture or any other means. And do not permit yourself to become so touchy that when someone hears a harsh word from a brother he is bothered, or gives a troublesome answer or persists in being vexed with him. That is not the path of those who want to be saved. That is not the way of the spiritual athlete. Go in search of the fear of God, but with discretion, so that you go to meet each other as friends, each bowing his head in front of his brother, as we say, each, humbling himself in front of God, and in front of his brother, and cutting away his own will for the sake of his brother. Actually, if a man does this well, and gives room to his brother, and allows him the place of honour, this very deference will be of more help to himself, rather than the other man. I am unaware of doing any good, but if I have been protected from this vice of taking liberties, I know that I was guarded because I never reckoned myself as being better than my brother, but I always considered my brother superior to me in virtue. A long time ago, when I was a disciple of Abba Seridos, the leader of old Abba John, a disciple of Abba Barsanuphius, Philil and my Abba, commanded me to minister to the old man. I used to do reverence at the door of his cell with as much devotion as one would pay respect to the cross of Christ. With much honor I would minister to him. Who would not want to be deemed worthy of serving such a saint? He had a wonderful means of speaking, and each time I had finished my service, I bowed to him and sought a word of advice before departing, and he always spoke with me. The old man had 4 words of advice, and as I said, each time I was about to depart he used to say one of these 4 words. He used to say, henceforth, for it was his habit to start every oracle which he spoke, henceforth, brother, may God keep you in love. The father used to say, that guarding your neighbour's conscience produces humility. Another evening he said to me, henceforth, brother, may God keep you in love. The father used to say, I never used to hold my desires above those of my brothers. Another time he said, henceforth may God keep you in love. The father used to say, flee from the dealings of men, and you will saved. Again he said, henceforth, brother, may God keep you in love. The fathers used to say, bear each other's burdens, and so you will fulfill the law of Christ. The elder always had advice from one of these 4 sayings as I went away each evening, as if he had given me a provision for a journey, and so I have held on to them as a safeguard all my life. Still, even though I had such confidence in the saint, and was so well inclined to do him service, and be obedient to him, when I saw that one of the other brothers was troubled by his desire to serve the old man, I went to the abbot to persuade him that this brother could do this service better than me. But the abbot did no permit him to do so, nor did the old man. But I had done my very best to submit to my brother, and even though I did this service for 9 years, I know that I did not speak one hurtful word to anyone, and I kept up this service, even though I had other chores to do. I say this for fear someone should say I had no work. Trust me, I know one brother who walked behind me from the infirmary to the church, cursing me the entire way. But I went ahead without saying a word. When the abbot heard of it, I don't know who mentioned it to him, he wanted to discipline him. But I fell before his feet, saying, do not do this, for the sake of the Lord. It was I who have failed. He has done nothing improper. And there was another brother, whether to irritate me or from simplicity, the Lord knows, which of the 2, during the stillness of the night, poured water on my head and drenched my bed. Likewise some of the other brothers started, during the day, to beat their mats in front of my cell. And I beheld such a mass of flies and stinging bugs entering into my cell, that I could not kill all of them. They were in such a great mass, on account of the heat, that when I came back to lie down they all descended on me. Sleep overtook me, because I was tired from my work, and then when I awoke I discovered that my body was bitten all over. However, I never spoke about any of these with any of them. Not, you should not do this, or why have you done this? I am not aware, as I said, of having said a harsh or bitter word. Learn then to carry each other's burdens. Learn to honour one another. And if any of you hears a distasteful word, or if one of you is smitten with a wilful provocation, do not immediately become shy or get angry. Do not be found weak at the time of the contest, ill-prepared in the needful time, not tuned, not able to confront such assaults which are ready to come. Do not be as a pumpkin that suddenly goes rotten if the insect stings it, but instead have a strong heart. Have patience that our love for each other will overcome all things that happen to us. If anyone should have a chore, or if anyone is ordered to cook, or to garden, or to be in the cellar, that is, for all of those who work, let him be sure to seek the answer himself, or to provide the service himself. And before everything let him stay with his job, and may he never permit himself to cause trouble or give room for his likes or reversions, or any of the self-wills, and so leave the commandment of God. And if the business is thought to be of small importance or great, may he never hate it or forsake it, for neglect is an evil thing. Again, may he not be arrogant because of the job he retains, for if this happens, he will do injury to himself by the job assigned to him. If you are troubled with any sort of business whatsoever, even if it is important, I do not want you ever to do it with disturbance or arguing, but to be fully persuaded that your job, whether it is important or not, as we have said before, it is only 1/8 part of thing we are after. But preserving one's proper state of being in submission to God and having respect for the brothers, even if it means losing our job, is 4 out of 8 parts, which is half of the thing we are after. See then how great the difference is. When you do anything then, if you desire to do it perfectly and fully, you must take heed to do it, knowing that it is the 8th part of what we would like to do, and to keep unharmed our own inner character as 4/8. If from the pressure of work we have to do something, we have to leave aside some rule, and we are injured, or we hurt another in doing our work, it is surely not good to bring to ruin the half so as to preserve the 8th. And if you know that there is a person doing this, he does not have the right understanding of the job he is doing. If either from ambition or by seeking to please men he is quarrelsome, he punishes both himself and his neighbour, so that later he can hear it said of him that nobody took advantage of him. God bless my soul! What great boldness! That is not a victory. Brothers, it is great loss. It is very much destruction. See, I tell you that, if I should send one of you on any important business whatsoever, and should see any commotion coming about or anything else injurious, may he cut it off, and not injure himself or anyone else. May the business fall away rather than let a disturbance arise. Only look to it that you do not irritate each other, for otherwise you will destroy the 4 parts, and this is obviously irrational. I don't tell you this that you should straightway become meek, and flee from what you have been assigned, or be neglectful, throwing up the matter and stifling your conscience on account of not wanting to do your work. Nor again, when you are given a command, that one of you might say, I am unable to do that. I will be hurt from it. Don't choose me. By this type of reasoning, no one would be given any sort of work or be able to observe God's commandment. But take hold of it with all your strength, being prepared to do all your work with love, with humility, deferring to each other, showing honor to each other, comforting each other. There is nothing greater than humility. But if someone realizes that his brother is momentarily disturbed, or if he himself is disturbed, break away and withdraw from each other, and do not continue giving way for further injury, because it is 1,000 times better that the business not go as you would like, but that it goes in accord with the needs of the full situation. Not to go immediately or through judicial order, even if it is reasonable, if you by this bother yourself and disturb each other, and so lose 4 of the 8 parts. There is a great difference in the loss inflicted. It happens that a man loses the whole 8 and yet still finish nothing at all. This is the entire story about contentiousness. Our fundamental principle is that all the work which we do by the help we receive from others. However important, it is for us to be humble when dealing with each other. When we do the opposite, we only give trouble and pain to one another. Do you know that someone said in the book of the Elders, "From the neighbor is life, and from the neighbor is death"? All the time each one must appreciate this word. From the elders, so that you might be zealous in seeking, with love and fear of God, the benefit of each other in addition to yourself. and thus you will be able to benefit from all things that befall you, and that you advance by the aid of God. God himself, the lover of men, will give us this fear, because it is written, "Fear God and maintain his precepts," because this is demanded of all men.